Kenzo, thank you. I don't know if it would embarrass you to ask you to take a bow after that performance. That was wonderful. Rejoice. Rejoice with full hearts, beloved people of blessing. Rejoice. May this time of worship celebrate what we know at our core. That blessings are real. They are ours to claim and share. That blessings are abundant. They are ours in which to revel and pass along to others. And that blessings are sometimes transformational and ours to be challenged by as we grow toward the faith we know we can be. Rejoice. Today's going to be a little different. We've changed the order of service, so for those of you who are already suffering vertigo from this liturgical loop, take a breath and relax. We're trying to do a new Sunday morning format when we have the youth in the sanctuary with us to expedite them getting to class, so they don't have to sit through the elements of the service that are just not interesting to them. Okay. But before we begin our service, let's take a moment, wave to the people watching on YouTube, and then rise and greet our neighbors, or if you're on YouTube, say hello in the chat. And when you hear the singing bowl bang, please return to your seats. So I'm going to ask our Acting Director of Religious Education, Amy Bottomley, to come forward with the youth from our program and light our chalice for us this morning.
You guys want to come on up? Okay, let's come on up. All right. So we're going to light this. Ooh, all right. I know, right? Pretty cool. Okay. So I'm going to have you guys face out there. Stay right here. Face out there. And I'm going to teach you all the words first. Okay? And we have hand gestures that go with our words. So when we light our chalice downstairs in Sunday school, we say something really simple. We say we are Unitarian Universalists. Unitarian. With a U and a U, with minds that think, hearts that love, hands that are ready to serve. Okay, we got that? Yeah. All right, let's do it all together. Are we ready? Yeah. Okay, we are Unitarian Universalists with minds that think, hearts that love, and hands that are ready to serve. Thank you. Would you guys have a seat?
So much. So, just a couple minutes of prelude before our first hymn. I think last week or the week before I mentioned that the theology and the messages of justice and its spirituality in our hymns are often very profound, but we don't tend to sing them with the profundity that they deserve. Nothing worse than going to church on a Sunday morning and hearing a bunch of Unitarians go, Hallelujah. Because if you go to a church where they live their theology, it's a hallelujah, brother. Because they feel and walk their talk, okay? So the first hymn is simple. It's the one that our youth have been listening to in chapel the last couple of weeks, This Little Light of Mine. But before we sing it, I want you to think for a minute about the light inside of you. And I want you to think for a minute about the ways the man has been keeping you down, forcing you to smother your light. How does that happen? Maybe it's because of your race. Maybe it's because of your sexual orientation. Maybe it's because of your gender. Maybe it's because of your theology. Maybe it's because of your socioeconomic status. There are lots of ways we feel we don't fit in and can't shine our light in the world because of it. Okay? So as we sing this hymn, This Little Light of Mine, I'm going to let it shine. I would love to hear you sing it as though you have a little light inside of you that hasn't been able to shine, and you're determined to let it shine, all right? If you would, please turn to 118 and rise as you are able. The words should appear on the screen this morning. Hallelujah and amen. Thank y'all.
Before we start our message for all ages today, Kenzo is making an encore appearance. He has an announcement for everyone from the Sunday school children.
Good morning. My name is Kenzo Wildenhouse, and I have an announcement from the Sunday school students. In order to show love, we are inviting everyone at First Church to donate unopened boxes of cereal for Shiloh Food Pantry. Please bring cereal to church and drop it off on the main floor until the end of October, waiting till you see what we build. Thank you.
So you can drop those boxes of cereal off by the RE bulletin board. There's a table underneath, and we're going to build something with all of those boxes. So the more boxes you bring, the cooler the results, and the more people we help. Guys, want to come up and hear a story? Come here. Yeah, have a seat. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, here, Isla, can you sit on this side so you can see the pictures? Here, can you guys sit over here so you can see the pictures? All right. So before we start, I have something that I'm going to read to let all the adults in the audience know what we've been working on. In Sunday school, we are learning about our principles. This month, we've discussed our first principle. We believe that each and every person is important. For each principle, we ask 2 questions. Why do we believe this? And how does this belief help us build a better world? In other words, what will this belief help you do? We talk about action. So, we have a little review first. Can I get you over here, please, Willa? Thank you. What can you tell us? What have we done so far about the first principle? What have we learned?
Love.
We've learned about love. We absolutely did. Do we remember who this guy is?
Mr. Harry?
Well, yeah, Mr. Harry. Do you remember what John Murray did? Do you remember what he did?
He flew him off.
He helped what?
The man.
He did. He helped. Are you thinking of the Good Samaritan? Yeah, we talked about the Good Samaritan too. Yep.
I know.
Yep. Remember what John Murray did?
He won an award for most hairiest guy.
No, that's not what he did. Not this time. Do you remember what John Murray did? We talked about?
He got together the first teachers.
Yes, he brought universalism to the United States. Remember we talked about how he changed from being a Calvinist to a Universalist, and he came to the United States and he started preaching here. So Universalists believe that God loves everyone. And the person that we are learning about today grew up going to a Universalist church in Massachusetts. A church was there because Reverend Murray brought Universalism to America. So, this person's name was Claire Barton. Claire was taught that God is love and that all lives are precious gifts. Her Universalist beliefs taught her that we need to do things to make sure that every person is important. Yeah? When she was just 11 years old, her brother fell off the roof of their barn. He was so badly injured, the doctor said his body would need a long time to heal, and he would need a lot of care to survive his injuries. Claire was determined to take care of her brother. To do this, she would have to stay home from school and miss out on important experiences because she liked school. But Claire decided to put her own needs aside and care for her brother. She pleaded with her parents, and they agreed. And she stayed with her brother day and night, feeding him, giving him medicine, and changing his bedding. It was almost 2 years before her brother was strong again and Claire could return to school. Claire continued to care for people as she grew up. As a teenager, she became a teacher and started a free school so that all children could attend, even if their families couldn't afford the fees. For years, Clara worked so hard teaching that she lost her voice. The doctor said she should rest, so Clara went to Washington, D.C. to stay with a friend. Meanwhile, the Civil War had begun in the United States, and Union soldiers returning from battle were flooding into Washington, D.C., and many were wounded and needed medical care. They were hungry and desperately in need of bandages and clothing, but the government wasn't ready for so many soldiers who needed help. Many people saw the soldiers on the street and thought, well, that's terrible. Somebody should really do something about that. And then they went about their lives. When Claire Barton saw the soldiers, she was reminded of her Universalist beliefs and asked, what will I do to help these soldiers? To make sure that each and every one of them were treated like they are important. She knew it wasn't enough to think the soldiers needed help. If she really believed it, she needed to take action and do something to help. Clara took her own money to buy food and clothes for the soldiers. She wrote to the newspapers asking people to donate blankets, medicines, and other supplies. So much came in that she needed to rent a warehouse to store it all. She worked out a system of making sure the soldiers got what they needed with the help of women who volunteered. Then Clara learned that soldiers on the battlefield needed food and medical care. Soldiers were dying because there wasn't anyone to help them on the battlefields. Many died waiting to be taken to the crowded army hospitals. At this time, women nurses not allowed on the battlefields. Okay, they maybe worked in the hospital. But Clara asked, "What can I do?" She had nursing skills that she learned from caring for her brother. Clara kept bugging the army to let her on the battlefields. When she finally got permission, she drove a wagon full of supplies to the front lines. There she went to work cooking and taking care of the wounded. Clara Barton became known as the Angel of the Battlefield. She provided care during 14 battles, nursing Union and Confederate soldiers, because she believed that everyone was important. No matter what side of the war they fought on, everyone deserved care. When the war ended, do you think Clara just went home and took a nap? No. When the war ended, Clara helped families search for their missing soldier relatives. The money the government provided to do this soon ran out. And again, Clara asked herself, "What can I do?" Despite not liking to speak in front of audiences, she was kind of shy. Clara Barton gave speeches to raise money, and she was a success. She worked so hard that once again, she lost her voice. This time, she traveled all the way to Switzerland to recover. There, she learned about an international Red Cross organization. It provided help to soldiers in wars, no matter what side they were on. Clara returned to the United States and tried to persuade the American government to join the Red Cross. And guess what she was told? No, can't do it. So do you think Clara gave up? No. Oh, we know her too well for that. But again, Clara took action and didn't give up. It took her 9 years. But in 1882, the government agreed to form the American Red Cross, and Clara was asked to be their first president. Clara expanded the Red Cross to aid people affected by forest fires, floods, earthquakes, and all kinds of disasters. She even spread these ideas to other countries with Red Cross organization. Clara was a Red Cross worker until she was 83. So why are we learning about Clara Barton?
Wow.
Clara is one of our Unitarian Universalist heroes that shows us the importance of taking action. Because if we truly believe in our principles, we need to do our principles to make the world a better place. So downstairs in class, we are going to add a new word to our word wall that represents Clara Barton. And that word is kindness. So if you guys will join me and go downstairs, we will do that.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I'm Dr. Riegel. I'm the developmental minister here at First Church, and I want to extend a warm welcome this morning to our visitors, both in the sanctuary and possibly watching online this morning. We are happy to have you with us today. Our church is a place you can bring your whole self, your full identity, and your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. We are a community committed to social justice and to supporting the various spiritual and ethical paths that our members and friends choose to take. If you're visiting with us in real time and space this morning, I invite you to join us for coffee hour after the service in Ellen Hall. If you don't know where Ellen Hall is, one of the ushers can point the way there, or you can just simply follow the smell of coffee and you will find your way to coffee hour. Our flowers today are in honor of the Jewish High Holy Days, which run from September 22nd to October 2nd. Quick announcement: as reported last Sunday, the first floor restrooms are now accessible, but please continue to keep your distance from the bookshelf area outside the sanctuary, where we're still dealing with mold damage from a water problem we had. But we are in the midst of fixing it, so hopefully in the next week or two it'll be remediated. So I'd like to invite you now into a moment of meditation. This will mostly be a silent meditation, but I'm going to give you a little grist for your silence this morning. Last week we heard a poem from Hafez, very short. How did the rose ever open its heart and give all its beauty to the world? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. This is very similar to something that Jesus is reported to have said. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but they put it on a lampstand where it gives light to all who are in the house. Your light must shine before people in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So as we participate in a couple minutes of silent meditation, if you'd like your mind to have a little grist for its silence, you can ponder or reflect upon how well and how often do you shine your light into the world to bless others. You'll hear me better if I turn my mic on, right? That's helpful. How y'all doing this morning? Are you wide awake? No? After that first hymn, this little light of mine, you're not wide awake? You want to help me do something really silly this morning? Are you willing? You got to be wide awake. In my previous congregation, I had a great relationship with a lot of people, but one person in particular used to banter back and forth with me about my sermons as a way of it was a form of intimacy. Because on occasion, when I did a sermon on a topic that I thought, this topic is really important to me because I know how important it has been in my life journey of transformation from the scoundrel I was to the sensational scoundrel I now am. And so when I did a sermon that had that kind of material in it, I would say, as a prelude, if you really take this sermon to heart, it will change your life. And I guess I did that too much because over time, this particular individual would say to me, I'd bring up a sermon and I'd start to talk about it. He said, I know what you're going to say. It's going to change my effing life, isn't it? Well, not with that attitude. But if you apply it in your daily life, it'll change your life. He's still a very beloved friend of mine. His name is Joe. Last name need not be repeated here this morning because we're broadcasting live. He's probably not watching, but he will after I tell him he needs to watch this. So on the count of 3, everybody look at the camera, if we can get the audience shot, the congregational shot, and say, hey, Joe, really loud, this sermon will change your life. All right? 1, 2, 3. Hey, Joe, this sermon will change your life. All right. That's not really neither here nor there for you all, but he will get a kick out of it, and I'll let you know his reaction. But that's a way of saying this sermon will also change your life. Sometimes sermon contains simple teachings, but they can be so profound and so deep that if you truly take them to heart and work with them in your life, they will change your life. And this morning I'm actually going to talk for about 25 minutes on action science, which I've taught here, and a number of you took the action science class, but a lot of you don't have the time and bandwidth to take a class like that. Some of the classes I teach require a lot of time from people. So I thought I would do a sermon as a way of encapsulating action science. And if you find this interesting, the recordings of that class are available and you can go look it up. The other reason I'm doing this is kind of my third sermon in probably a sermon series of 3, where I'm trying to do a synopsis of a lot of the information I've shared with you as your developmental minister over the last 2 years. And so this one is the third and last in that series. It's also going to be rather PowerPoint heavy, but not quite as PowerPoint heavy as the previous sermons. But by the time I'm done, if I've done a good job, you're going to say, hey, that could change my life. So let's go to that first slide. I love the musical Oliver Twist. You know this? There's a little ditty they're singing in the city, especially when they've been on the gin or the beer. If you got the patience, your own imaginations will tell you just exactly what you want to hear. Do you know that? Sing it with me really loud in the spirit of Sister Carol. There's a little ditty they're singing in the city, especially when they've been on the gin or the beer. If you got the patience, your own imaginations will tell you just exactly what you want to hear. That's a life-changing song, especially the chorus. Papa, papa. This is an action science song. And when I encounter people who don't know action science and they're committing what I call action science sins, I sometimes say to myself, papa, that's how it goes. If only they knew If only they knew. So in the next 20 minutes, you're going to know. If you hit the forward arrow once, something should pop up here. The psyche abhors a vacuum. So what does that mean in the context of this song? If you've got the patience, your own imaginations will tell you just exactly what you want to hear. In other words, our psyches move through the world, and part of what our psyches do is try to create meaning out of the world and make the world make sense. So it's constantly creating narratives, right? But what we fail to recognize is the narratives our psyches create as we move through the world and try to calculate it and make sense of it so we know how to be in it. We fail to recognize that our narratives are wrong more often than they're right. Or at least they're partially wrong a lot of the time. But we fail to recognize that because there are narratives. They couldn't possibly not be right, truthful, perfect, meaningful. So one of the things action science says is, have a little humility about the narratives your psyche writes about the world, and consider the possibility that it may not be entirely accurate. The reason it's not entirely accurate is because when we lack information, or we don't know what's really going on inside of another person, we tend to make assumptions about the world and attributions about other people. And we take those assumptions and attributions as accurate because they're ours. And we create narratives around them. But this is a problem set because everybody's doing this, and if we're all doing this, often our narratives don't jibe with each other, then we've got some interpersonal dynamics to manage. And so I'm going to talk this morning about how not to commit the action science sins of making attributions about people or making assumptions about the world. So let's, the next slide will probably be me. Hello, everybody. And we can go right away to the next slide. So the first action science sin I want to talk about briefly, hit that forward arrow if you would, is the assumption. So what is an assumption? An assumption is when we do not test the information in our heads against the reality of the situation, and then proceed to act as though the information in our heads, in fact, correlates with the reality of the situation. In other words, the way the world's really working may be different than the way it's working in our heads. Because we've made assumptions about the world that are not true. But if we don't recognize that we do this and begin to test our assumptions about the world, we're going to walk around in the world with wrong ideas about the world because we don't bother testing our assumptions with the actual world we live in. And this is going to create problems for us, right? So when you think about what an assumption is, that we do not test information in our heads against the reality of the situation or against the real world. Can you think of examples of assumptions you might have made this morning, yesterday, sometime this week, that you later found out to be wrong? And you can go to the next slide, which will be me again, and I'll wave to our audience magically. Have you made any assumptions recently that you found out were wrong? Are you carrying information in your head that you used to create your narrative, only to find out that information was erroneous? Just raise your hand. You don't have to share. Yeah, more of you have than you think, but you're not used to thinking about the nature of your assumptions, right? Does anybody have an example of an assumption you might make that may not correlate with reality? What kind of information is out there in the world that might be different than the information you have in your head? Anybody? It could be information about anything. A lot of us have political opinions about things. Oh, somebody had an example? Progression of time. Ooh, that's a high-end assumption. Say more about it. Gotcha. That is actually a great example, but it's too long for me to repeat to our audience. But that is an example. I'm gonna pick one a little more digestible, though. But we should have coffee and talk about that one. Ramona, you got one?
Yes, some assume that Donald Trump is evil.
Ah,
When there has been data to show that it's possible that he's unwell, like many human beings.
all right. That's closer to an attribution than an assumption. And if you didn't hear that on YouTube, it was I think a relatively kind statement about the psychological state of our president. We'll leave it at that. But you know, we have a lot of political opinions, for instance, or you know, when the tariffs were enacted this fall, there were a lot of people I talked to about how evil the tariffs were. And you know, I just go through the world talking to people, and I get the sense that we all think we know a lot more than we really do. We have all sorts of opinions about our politicians. Sometimes our opinions are right, but sometimes they have a lot more information than we do. And they're trying to make decisions based on the information they have that we don't have. But if they don't make decisions that we like, we feel we have all the information necessary to critique the decision making. Might be true, might be false, okay? Or I think about economics. The number of people in liberal circles who wanted to throw Republicans under the bus when the tariffs were rolled out, and they were all supportive of it. I decided, you know, I'm going to actually prod people with a little action science, and I'm going to say to them, what is the history of tariff use in this country by our presidents? And where do tariffs really affect the economy? And can you think of an example where tariffs might have actually been constructive for a while when they were enacted? And I get these blank stares as though, how can you ask me these questions? Aren't you a good liberal? You should just hate tariffs because they came from the Republicans. Well, actually, I'm not somebody who believes that everything that arises out of Republican action is by definition evil. I actually consider things, even when I don't like the things. And I realized I learned a lot about tariffs when they were rolled out. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And we don't know yet how this is all going to play out. But speaking to my liberal friends, they didn't want any of that information. They didn't want to really talk to me about what tariffs were and what the history of them were and why they might make sense at times and why they may not. And we don't know just yet, do we? Because when I began to prod and ask, do you have all the information you really need to have such a strong stance on this economic issue? They got defensive because it challenged the narrative in their head and suggested it may not match the real world, folks. So there's lots of examples of how there's information in the world that we either don't have or that we have wrong. And it should give us some humility around the narratives we construct around that information or lack thereof. And action science just says, be aware that you do that. Be aware that you do that. Because if it's a problem, you can go back and figure out where you got it wrong. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. This is the second action science sin we're going to talk about today, and we're only talking about two. This is the attribution. Much closer to your comment, Ramona. An attribution is when we assign intention, motive, or condition to others without first testing that assignment of intention, motive, or condition with the others. Here's an example. We see somebody take an action. We don't like the action. We think the action might even be harmful. And so we immediately assume the person who took the action did so because they're not a kind person and they meant to do that harm. That's an easy one to understand, isn't it? Right? But is that necessarily true? Is it necessarily true that every action someone takes that I don't agree with, that I think is not good for people, is necessarily an action being taken because that person's motive is evil? Really? Do we really believe that? Yeah. I mean, sometimes it may be. But often, maybe it's just the case that actually that person's motive might be good, but they may not be taking the right action, even though they think they are. So the attribution is making an attribution about somebody's motive or intent that may not be accurate. And I think we far too easily fall into our interpretation of somebody else's actions in the world based on the way we think we would act in the world if we were them. And if they don't act in the world the way we think we would act if we were them, then they're not as kind-hearted as us, and they must have malintent. But a lot of action being taken in the world, even if it chagrins you, is being taken out of good intent. It may not have the effect you want. The reasoning behind it may not, match yours, but the intent is usually a lot better than we tend to ascribe to people. That's understandable, right? No. You don't agree with it, or you can't understand it?
Probably both.
Oh.
The greed issue, it's an issue for me. But don't delay.
Oh, I'm not gonna. Because we're having coffee tomorrow, right? We got coffee tomorrow. So let's move on. Next slide, and this will be me waving to our audience again. So I want to take these, and I want to talk a little bit about how they show up in the world. So let's go to the next slide. Real quickly, a little Enneagram. A lot of you have done the Enneagram. If you haven't, these are also recorded and available to you if this interests you. So hit the forward arrow. Let's do it twice to expedite this. So the Enneagram basically talks about how we become conditioned as human beings. You've heard me say that we're born into the world, we're pretty powerless, and there are a lot of things that condition us into adulthood. Our biology, our family of origin, our peer group, and the culture at large, right? But we don't all get conditioned in the same way. We get conditioned in different ways. And the Enneagram basically said there are different ways that people end up being conditioned. We're different from each other. But we all do have predictable habits of mind and emotions. So two of those is the Enneagram type 1, whose emotional habit tends to be anger. They tend to have like a mild or mid-level chronic anger all the time. They tend to be very contracted individuals. And they also tend to be perfectionists in their mindset, because one of the ways the type 1 alleviates the anger they feel inside or keeps it suppressed is they go around and they make the world in their image. If the world morally ought to look like this, and where it's not like this, I'm going to work to make it like this. Or everything in my environment must be symmetrically perfect. If you got OCD, I got a little of that. If I'm in a room and the picture's not hanging right, I will gradually walk over and fix it on the wall so it's symmetrical on the wall. Could be anything from morality to the environment, or whatever the case may be. But the ones tend to be perfectionistic, and when they can perfect the world according to their standards, they don't tend to be angry about the world. But when the world isn't perfect according to their standards, they'll get angry. That's one type of conditioning. Another type of conditioning is the number 7, okay? They're gluttonous folks. And their habit of mind is possibility. Well, what does that mean? The 7 is not the least bit concerned about the 1's perfectionist attitude toward life. In fact, they find it rather annoying. The 7 thinks life is a cornucopia of possibility and fun. So they're spending their time satisfying their gluttony by looking for positive possibilities in the world. What can we do next? Who wants to go to the party with me? What great vision can we plan for the church now? Right? Always positive possibility. You probably know both people like this, but you can see why they might chagrin each other. The 1, who's kind of a moral purist, might look at the 7, who's kind of rule avoidant if it gets in the way of my fun and pleasure, and say to that person, my God, you've got no boundaries at all, do you? You just go through the world doing what you want to do, having fun, and I'm doing all the work to keep everything in place so it doesn't fall apart and it's all perfect for you. Thank you very much. And the 7 looks at the 1 as like, oh my God, are you a downer or what? All I'm asking you to do is cut loose once in a while, have some fun, let's go have a beer. Let's go to a show, let's whatever, right? So you can see how personalities will conflict with each other, right? Just on the basis of these two examples. Okay, so let's hit the forward arrow. And we will go here. Whatever your conditioning is, if you're an Enneagram 1 or 7 or any of the other types or any other kind of conditioning that works for you, Myers-Briggs or whatever the case may be, that causes you to look out at the world through your conditioned lens. So when a type 1 looks at the world, they're looking at the world for the things that interest them. When a 7 looks at the world, they're looking at the world for the things that interest them. Whoever you are, whatever your conditioning is, your habit of mind and feeling causes you to look at the world for the things that interest your particular conditioning. It just makes sense to do that. The problem is, those habits of thoughts and feelings that determine these perceptions, that cause us to look in the world for only the things that interest us, cause us to see only a small fraction of the world. Because we have no interest in anything that doesn't resonate with our conditioning. So we miss a lot. The world is full of possibilities and experiences and gifts and challenges that we don't even see if our conditioning doesn't cause us to look for it. So it's really important to remember, you're conditioned and your perspective is pretty finite. And you're missing a lot of the world all the time. Because you only bother looking for the things you're conditioned to look for. You get that? Okay, let's hit it again. So your type structure or your conditioning scans the environment for data that confirms you. Like the 1 will look for, where are things not morally upright? Because morality is important to me. They'll find it, and they'll go help that situation and make things moral. Or the 7 is like, well, where do people really need my juice and energy so they understand how important it is to have fun in life, and I can help be the life of the party, you know? So we do that, and we can always find examples that satisfy our conditioning, which tells us, see, it makes sense to be me. I help the world be morally pure. I help this group of people who are down all the time finally see that life can be fun and exciting. You will find success in the world scanning for what interests your conditioning. Okay, next. But like I said, the problem is you miss everything else. Ram Dass has a saying he got from somewhere. When a pickpocket meets the Pope, all he sees are the Pope's pockets. That's a way of talking about how your conditioning limits your perspective. The pickpocket will see the Pope's pockets, but not the holiness of the Pope. And for now, we're assuming the Pope is holy. We're not going to go there, okay? Next slide. That'll be me waving again. Hello, audience. Okay. And the next slide. If you don't take anything else away from this sermon, take this. What I just explained about your relationship to the world at large, we do to each other all the time. We scan each other to see if there's something in the other person that is interesting to the way I'm conditioned in the world. I'm an Enneagram 4. I will out myself. I'm an Enneagram 4. We tend to be individualists. We tend to be romantics. We tend to be creative. And we tend to like life to be deep and meaningful. Oh my God, the roses, the poetry, all of it. You just learned a great deal about me. So if I hadn't done so much work and understood that that's my conditioning, I'd be more of a scoundrel than I am. But what that means is when I meet somebody else, I still have this habit of mind and emotion that causes me to what? To look and see if any of the things I'm conditioned to value in the world are present in this other person. Are they existentially deep? Do they like Rumi? Are they into aesthetics, and do they like maybe even grow roses? And if I find it, oh, it's so sweet, and we've got a connection. Okay? But if I don't find it, woe is me to discard such a person and miss the other gifts they might be able to offer me that I'm not even interested in because I'm only scanning for what I want. Right? Do you get that? So what we do to the world, we do to each other. So my suggestion is, based on this is not the point of the sermon, but it's a point in the sermon. Hang in with people you may not resonate so much with. You might be shocked if you hang in long enough at the gifts they offer you. The more different from you they are, the more likely they have a gift for you. Okay? Next slide. All right, we're going to keep going past that one too. Climbing the ladder of inference. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the sermon. This is where we get back to action science and how Enneagram informs action science. Hit the forward arrow once. So the ladder of inference is a reasoning process we go through when we're trying to make sense of the world. We just saw an event take place. We had a conversation. We watched a political debate. The war in Ukraine is raging. Whatever the case may be. We're walking into the board meeting tonight, and there's a difficult topic on the table to discuss. Whatever the case may be, our minds automatically start to reason and create the narrative we're going to use to engage that situation. Okay? And as we do this, there's a process we go through. Hit the forward arrow again. So directly observable data is, what is the empirical reality of the world? Like, just what are the facts about the world in this situation, right? But as soon as we enter the situation or witness the situation, automatically the mind tries to interpret it and create that narrative. And the first thing it does, it interprets that situation through shared cultural understanding. That's not so problematic, but you know that different cultures interpret different behaviors differently. What might be a neutral behavior in one culture can be an insult in another, right? In India, don't shake with the wrong hand. That's a huge insult. And if you understood what Indian bathrooms were like, you would understand why you don't shake with the wrong hand in India, right? It's taboo, right? So there are different cultural interpretations of different behaviors, but most of us share the same cultural interpretation. And this isn't very problematic for us, but the next step on the ladder, hit the forward arrow, is this: the personal meanings that are imposed by us in a situation. So we see a situation, we enter a situation, we witness an event, and we have this cultural understanding of it, and that doesn't usually pique us much and doesn't usually create problems between us because we share the same culture by and large. But when we start also adding into this situation our personal interpretation of the event that we witnessed or the situation we're in, everybody else witnessing that event or in that situation is doing the same thing. So what's going on there? Well, the one is beginning to interpret the situation according to their conditioning. And the two is beginning to interpret the situation according to their conditioning. And the three is beginning to interpret their conditioning according to their situation, on and on and on. All the different conditionings, using Enneagram speak on the Enneagram, are suddenly imposing their conditioned interpretation into the situation. And that's where we're likely to be at least partially wrong more often than we think. And that's where we need to begin to question. So why is this pertinent? This is the point of the sermon. If you're in an interpersonal dynamic, whether it's at work, at home with your partner, with your children, with your friends, it doesn't matter. I can guarantee you that 90% of the time, when there are tensions in that interpersonal relationship, this will explain it. You're climbing up that ladder of inference, that reasoning process you go through, and you're both doing it, and you get far enough up on the ladder where you hit the part where you're beginning to impose or interpret things through your conditioned lens, and you begin to have very different ideas about an event or in a situation that you've witnessed or that you're sharing. And those different ideas are when we get into this interpersonal tug-of-war. Well, clearly you don't get how the world works, because my idea about how this works is right, and I'm happy to spend all my time explaining what you got wrong. But we all do this. And action science says, use your understanding of your tendency to impose your own meaning in situations to have a little humility. Recognize when there are tensions in your relationships that you're just dealing with someone else or some other group of people. who are imposing their own meanings in the situation, and they just have different ideas about it. And it's not about right and wrong. It's about everybody has different ideas. So rather than launch into the, well, my narrative is my narrative, so it must be the right narrative, and so I have to spend my time compelling you to adopt my narrative, which is what we do unconsciously, right? But now that I've named that, you've all probably seen that, and you all probably recognize you do it. The thing to do is take a breath. Consider the possibility, have enough humility, that the conviction you have about your interpretation of a situation when you're involved in interpersonal tension is just a perspective of a number of possible valid perspectives. And don't be so identified with it. Let it settle or set it aside for a minute and genuinely say to the other person, I'm not getting where you're at with this situation, but I'm interested. How do you draw the conclusions you draw? How do you interpret it that way? Because I certainly don't. And you're not asking that to have a gotcha moment when they say the wrong thing. You're asking that because you understand they're conditioned, you're conditioned, everybody else is conditioned. You have one little perspective. There are lots of other perspectives. And maybe you're just missing something. Maybe you don't have the information you need. Maybe the information you need is actually wrong. Maybe the attribution you're making about another person in this situation is erroneous. Just consider those possibilities. Have some humility and genuinely say, Barbara, help me understand your perspective. Tell me how you got there. And hear what she has to say. If you do that, you will diffuse most of your interpersonal conflicts. Because A, that'll value the other person because they don't feel valued when you're trying to compel them to adopt your point of view because that's your point of view, not theirs. Where's their value in that? So if I really want to hear you, you'll feel valued. Okay? And you might find out you had the wrong information after all, or you made a false attribution after all. So just listen and recognize it's not a competition. One person's right, the other's wrong. It is a dance. All interpersonal relationships are dances of different perspectives. And if you can recognize that, have some humility, and dance with people, especially when tensions arise, you're going to solve a lot of your life problems. Next. And next. So 4 simple steps. Here's the takeaway. Arrow. Be aware when you're making an assumption. You're going to make them. It's human nature. But it's helpful to know you're doing it. And the hardest time to know you're doing it is when you think your assumption is absolutely correct. If it doesn't correlate with the reality of the situation, it's not correct, no matter how convinced you are about it. Just recognize you do this, okay? Just in case you're wrong. Next, be aware when you're making an attribution about somebody's intention or motive. You may be right, but you may be wrong. Just be aware. Next, stay as low as possible on the ladder of inference. In other words, there is fundamental empirical data about the world that we all experience together and before we start interpreting events and situations that we can agree about and share about. And so if you find yourself in conflict with somebody, with that person, go back and say, let's start our reasoning process from the beginning. Did you see what I saw? Were you at the same event as me? And just begin to ask, where are we beginning our reasoning process? And then as you climb the ladder, try to stay together. And finally, here's your takeaway mantra. Inquire first. Before you make an assumption, before you make an attribution, learn to inquire. The number of emails I get where people have assumed I don't have information, or I have the wrong information, rather than just writing me an email and saying, hey, what information are you working from? And I can tell them, rather than having to defend myself against their assumption that I don't have the information or that I have wrong information. Well, here's my information. Do you have more? I inquire back. I actually do have more. Oh, what is that? That's interesting. Great, now I have more data upon which to build my reasoning process. How hard is that? It disarms people. And also inquire. Look, when I saw you do that, I think you were being kind of nasty there. Don't be a nasty person, right? That's an accusation. The inquiry is, I saw you do this, it bothered me. Can you explain to me, what was your intent? Just ask, what was your intent? Don't assume you know. And that will disarm a situation, okay? So that's the lesson. When you go through life, recognize your own internal reasoning process and the way your mind tends to create a narrative about the world, that it uses a lot of assumptions and a lot of attributions, some of which may be right, but some of which may be wrong, and you have to be open to that possibility. And if you can get that far, that changes your dynamic because you begin to inquire with one another rather than try to compel one another to adopt your likely erroneous point of view. Okay? All right, next slide. And the next slide. Papa, papa. That's how it goes. Papa, papa. Everyone knows. They all suppose what they want to suppose when they hear papa. So for the next 9 months, while I'm still your developmental minister, if we are in conversation and I'm catching you making an assumption or an attribution that might be problematic, and I look at you and I say, papa, papa. Don't spit out your coffee and say, are you having a stroke? Take that as a gentle, friendly cue to hear from me the possibility that you're committing an action science sin, and maybe you should pause and think the reasoning process through. That's it. Our last hymn this morning is, what number is that? God of Grace and God of Glory? 115. Please rise and sing as you are able. Please be seated. I apologize for the length of the service today. It's been a while since I've gone over, so you owe me a bit. And you may not know this, but we're actually keeping our children in Sunday school until quarter after the hour. So if you're a parent, you're actually not late picking up your kids. But thank you for your tolerance, your indulgence, but I hope that the extra time today was worth the takeaway. We end with words from Jonathan Murray, who we heard about today during the Message for All Ages a little bit. Jonathan Murray wrote, "You may possess only a small light, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women." Blessed be.